Okay, I'm going to start with chapter 5 in Never Again Means Never Again. Chapter 5, The Versailles Lie. In quotes, I have at top, "It is not truth that matters, but victory," end quote, Adolf Hitler. Let's take a deeper dive into the post-World War I punishment for Germany, otherwise known as the Treaty of Versailles. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Hitler and the Nazis concocted another lie, and this was a world-class doozy. The Nazis coming to power based on Germany's treatment caused by the Treaty of Versailles is bullshit. Yes, it's been the number one justification in everyone's mind in every country for the last 100 years, but it's not because of the Treaty of Versailles. Teachers and professors around the world can now stop today teaching this lie to their students that this treaty had any real reason for Germany starting World War II or other than being used as propaganda. Understanding the articles. The treaty contains a series of articles, with Article 232 stating, quote, also, the Allies acknowledge Germany's incapability to fulfill the reparations demanded of them. However, the Allies require that Germany nonetheless undertake the compensation for all civilian damages caused by German aggression by land, sea, or air, end quote. Article 232, quote, demands that Germany also be responsible for the complete restoration of Belgium by reimbursement of the monies borrowed by Belgium from the Allies with interest at a rate of 5% per year, end quote. Articles 235 through 244 highlight the specific payments to which countries and for what amounts. This ranges for payments of $20 billion from 1919 to 1920 to pay for Allied expenses. Furthermore, Germany's paying cash to compensate for the cash taken away, seized, or sequestered, and, quote, object of nature and securities, like heirlooms, fine art, and jewelry, that was stolen during the war and found in German territory or that of her allies, end quote. The German government had to recognize the Reparations Commission, release information relative to the military operations, and pay for the individual salaries that were on the commission. Articles 248 through 263 involved financial clauses. Articles 264 to 312 involved economic clauses and dealt with commercial relations and custom regulations, duties, and restrictions. Real outcomes. Okay, now that we've highlighted the articles of substance, let's address the outcome. With the rise of Hitler and the Nazis in the 1920s and 1930s, everyone always points out the Treaty of Versailles and says things like, quote, if the Treaty of Versailles wasn't so punitive, end quote, or, quote, Hitler came to power because of the Treaty of Versailles, end quote, or, quote, the Treaty of Versailles punished the German people and government way too harshly, giving them no chance to fulfill its terms, end quote. The Treaty of Versailles is far and away the most consistent attribute worldwide as the main and some would say only reason Hitler rose to power in World War II. It's just not true. It's not close to being true, and it's not even in the realm of being true. And the actual facts back up my claims. France thought the Treaty of Versailles was too lenient, and the U.S. never even ratified it, accepting the quote war guilt quote end quote clause and reparations terms probably didn't put too many smiles on the German faces, but that was far from a knockout blow. Furthermore, and I feel I must explain this like I'm talking to a child, Germany lost the war, and many keep forgetting that 40 million people died. Of course, there were going to be repercussions, but not nearly to the level of what the majority believes. Yes, Germany lost a little bit of territory, and yes, German people in government felt that they were having the terms quote unquote dictated to them, but who gives a shit how they were told? Dictated to them or forced down their throats was really the only punishment from this treaty in Germany at the time. Are demands and concessions dictated to winners of wars? I would like any example. Thank you. Let's look at some specifics and real outcomes of the Treaty of Versailles. Hopefully, people will stop pushing this bullshit rhetoric that it caused World War II and the rise of the Nazi Party. It didn't. False claim. Germany was unfairly burdened with punitive and costly war reparations that destroyed its post war economy, causing crippling hyperinflation and doomed the democratic Weimar Republic. The reality: defeated nations often pay reparations as part of treaties, ending European wars. This penalty was not suddenly invented at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference to punish Germany. It was a long-standing tradition. How hypocritical of Germany to complain when it imposed these type of penalties on countries it defeated. Penalties imposed by Germany included demand of billions from Russia, the heavily punitive March 1918 Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and forcing France to pay billions in indemnities after victory in the 1870-1871 Franco-Prussian War. In fact, German forces continued to occupy parts of France until payment was made. The French promptly paid in full, even though the cost was equal to 25% of their national income. Germany's cost for World War I was only between 4 to 7%. Germany complained about having to pay for civilian damages caused by its invasion occupation of Belgium in northern France. The Allies calculated the amount based on Germany's ability to pay, not on the actual cost of repairing those damages, which was much, much, much greater. The claim that the Versailles Treaty required Germany to pay the, quote, entire cost of the war, end quote, is completely false, as verified in Article 232, which stated that Germany was to pay, quote, compensation for all damage done to civilian populations of the Allied and the associated powers and to their property during the period of belligerency, end quote. A slap on the wrist with a feather. The following is common knowledge. The initial reparation dollar amount that everyone points to Germany owing was 132 billion marks in reparations. This number was intentionally misleading. The Allies never intended for Germany to pay such a huge sum. It was an effort to fool the general public, but mainly fool the French into thinking that Germany was going to be severely and economically punished. Historian and economist Sally Marks and others point out that the actual figure the Allies intended Germany to pay, in which they had calculated Germany could pay, was only 50 billion marks, considering that during treaty negotiations, the Germans offered to pay $51 billion. By the way, Germany received far more in U.S. loans, which was $27 billion, than it paid out in cash for reparations and defaulted on the loans in 1932 after paying back only a small percentage. Other than the in kind payments, Germany paid no out of pocket war reparations. Yeah, what? This can't be. I'm shocked. It's impossible. I was led to believe that Germany was crippled by war reparations. The truth has to be a myth. French economist Etienne Manteau surely was right when he wrote, quote, Germany was not unable to pay reparations, it was unwilling to pay them, end quote. So, what we hear about the Allies crippling the Germans economically through the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler's subsequent rise to power, and why Germany started World War II is a ruse. It's bullshit. Yep. Sorry to inform all of you of this world class lie. Look it up. There are multiple places you can find this information. I mean, Hitler, his henchmen, his butt buddies, and every German who lived in the fatherland and followed his ideologies could only deny it by outright lying to themselves. Sorry, Hitler duped German citizens, and he duped the present day Jew haters again. The overhyped treaty didn't affect Germany at any level, with the exception of false propaganda. In 1924, the Allies and Germany agreed to implement the Dawes Plan. A great plan. It lasted about an hour. It gave Germany back the Ruhr, and it fucked France on the agreed upon tonnage of coal Germany was supposed to send. And Germany was set up to receive loans from the U.S. to pay back its reparations. Was there anything else we could have possibly given to help Germany? Think about it. From the day the Treaty of Versailles was signed in June of 1919 until the London Agreement in 1953, the United States banks paid back more of Germany's reparations to Germany. But yeah, it really crippled Germany's economy, right? Remember, the Dawes Plan was done in 1924, well before the Nazis came to power. Was there a reason no one brought this up? There is a slight reason it may not have been talked about, and that is the Young Plan. The Young Plan further lowered Germany's debt, as did the London Agreement of 1953. But instead of boring you with all the details, just note that none of them did shit, except continually lower the amounts of money Germany owed and increase the time needed for them to start paying it back. I mean, the London Agreement allowed Germany to wait until they were a unified country again, for fuck's sake. The bottom line is Germany was coddled and indulged. By 1933, Germany had made World War I reparations of only 1/8 of the sum required under the Treaty of Versailles. The actual effects on Germany were three things. One, whatever the travel costs of plane tickets or gas prices for the representatives that attended these three useless conferences. Two, read what I wrote on the Treaty of Versailles, document yourself, and tell me what real punishments Germany incurred from it. And three, the treaty was a fucking joke, a sham. This treaty was a launching pad, quote, call to arms from the Nazis. And even though the treaty wasn't enforced, with only one minuscule exception, and that was France in the Ruhr. Thus, Germany was never punished for World War One, but we were, us, the rest of the world. World War II was obviously started and caused 100% by Germany, but Allied complacency and constantly letting Germany slide didn't help. Trust me, I get it. No one wanted to go back to war due to enforcing a treaty, nor did anyone know how psychotic Hitler would be. It's sometimes frustrating talking about the Treaty of Versailles because, again, most still believe it was a major reason why Germany started the war. Ironically enough, the biggest gift Hitler ever received was the Treaty of Versailles. He used it to his full advantage any chance he could. Even when he didn't have a chance, he still fucking used it. If a dog had a fart in Berlin, Germany simply just blamed it on the treaty. Oh, or the Jews. Hyperinflation. I'm not sure where we currently stand on how many times I've used the word bullshit and lies already in this chapter. So let's bring out a new word, myth. It's a complete and utter myth, again, that the War Reparations Clause had anything to do at any level with Germany's horrific hyperinflation of the early 1920s. It simply played no role in Germany's economy. It's another myth that crippling and punitive war reparations caused the disastrous hyperinflation that ruined Germany's economy between 1921 to 1924. The treaty had 0.00000 to do with anything related to Germany's economy. Nothing, zero, nada, nicked. Remember, it only paid a small fraction of reparations and used U.S. loans to do so. Germany's economy wasn't ruined. When Germany was going through its hyperinflation period and it cost around 4.2 billion marks for a loaf of bread, it wasn't because of heavy reparations. But wait, that can't be true. We've all been taught that the Treaty of Versailles was the root cause hourly the minute after the treaty was signed. Pay attention. You'll learn something here. Germany's post World War II hyperinflation stemmed from the Kaiser and his ministers borrowing money rather than imposing taxes. Thus began a steady deduction of the German mark against foreign currencies. So Germany printed more money, causing inflation and then hyperinflation. Yeah, but what about the Treaty of Versailles? It's the treaty's fault, right? The treaty's the real culprit. Our trustworthy Nazi leaders told us so. Hello, this is the treaty calling, and I've always been told it's my fault too. So kiss my ass. Can anyone provide information that the treaty had any part in hampering Germany at all? Again, outside of France's short term in the time in the Ruhr, I mean, this thing was a fucking joke. In fact, the trigger for post war inflation was the Weimar government's response to the 1923 French occupation of Germany's Ruhr industrial region after Germany's constantly defaulted on its reparation payments. The Weimar government encouraged and abetted passive resistance, such as work stoppages and strikes, to the French occupation. German workers were paid for their cooperation with vast amounts of this printed money. No wonder inflation skyrocketed. By November 1923, a loaf of bread cost German 3 billion marks, a pound of meat cost 3 billion, and a glass of beer was 4 billion. But yeah, it's laughable that the Weimar Republic government blamed the hyperinflation on war reparations because Germany wasn't paying reparations at the time. Germany's own economic policies caused the economic catastrophe. In 1924, the German mark stabilized the German economy, and by 1927, years before Hitler came to power, it was one of the world's strongest economies. So again, Germany's post-war decisions crushed the economy. Hitler, of course, would also exploit the Great Depression from 1930 to 1933 as an excuse. Okay, recapping the boatload of lies. So let me get this straight. From 1920 to 1931, Germany paid $12.5 billion in cash for reparations and $7.5 billion in kind, while borrowing $27 billion from U.S. banks over the same time. Furthermore, the next payment Germany made towards reparation was in 1953. From 1953 to 1958, they made interest payments only. Well, it doesn't take a forensic accountant to see that the Treaty of Versailles played absolutely zero part in any reparations or affected Germany's economy and finances at all. None. We've heard for years how difficult and impossible it was for both German citizens and their government, how crippling the sanctions were, and how they led to the rise of Hitler and the Nazis, blah, blah, blah. It was all bullshit. If the Germans knew it or not, it was a boatload of lies spewed by every member of the Nazi Party to get their party elected. Now, starting World War I, getting your ass kicked and having 15% of your male population killed will certainly affect your economy. But being given a number of restitutions, having it lowered in half, and still not paying for it did not and would not affect Germany's economy. It never did. The tens of thousands of lies by Hitler and the Nazis were nothing but horseshit propaganda, continually perpetuated because the people that knew it was all lies said nothing. According to HistoryNet, great source, by the way, HistoryNet, fantastic. Perhaps the most alarming part of the Treaty of Versailles is Article 231, the so called war guilt clause that mentions neither guilt nor war. Yet German politicians, first in the Weimar Republic and later Hitler and the Nazis, used the term to demonize the treaty and avoid Germany's obligations. German propagandists in the 1920s and 1930s created this fairy tale. However, the treaty did not force Germany to accept the humiliating war guilt clause. Blaming this clause for the whole entire war is disingenuous and patently false. Yet, historians continue to parrot this propaganda. It was so successful during the 1920s that many Allied countries, Britain especially, embraced the notion. This discouraged the Allies from rigorously enforcing the treaty. Standing alone without context, Article 231 does appear to make the Germans' war guilt claim seem credible. HistoryNet reminds us that Article 231 is a preamble to reparations. It was not solely intended to blame Germany for the war. American diplomats Norman Davis and John Foster Dulles simply established Germany's acceptance of the responsibilities to pay reparations for civilian damages caused by its military. And those would be in the Articles 233 to 247, parentheses of Part 6 and 2. Germany started the war and lost. They started it by declaring war on Russia to defend Austria Hungary against Serbia. This declaration of war was justified through mutual alliances. Germany is, without question, culpable. What I don't understand is why Germany feels so slighted to admit it. This is utterly ridiculous to me, and how it hurt their pride is flabbergasting. Does it bother anyone in Germany or on the planet if I say Germany started World War II? Germany started World War I. How could they possibly have been offended by that? I understand how news was dispersed 100 years ago, but even today, people still bitch about the war guilt clause. Now, there wasn't one. How about the quote, Germany started World War II, unquote clause, if it makes anyone feel better? If anyone is to blame, it's unquestionably the German government, as Austria Hungary wouldn't have done a fucking thing without the backing and urging of Germany. Germany declared war on Russia and France, and they violated international treaties by invading Luxembourg and Belgium. Hello, Germany started the war guilt clause or not, and they simply needed to own it. The German government at the time before the war and immediately after World War I, through spreading Hitler's charcoal's ashes over a Berlin methane plant so it wouldn't easily mix in with the same smell. Yes, the lies continued after 1945, as almost every German politician still uses it as a battle cry to avoid adhering to the Treaty of Versailles. Both Davis and Dulles were shocked when German politicians chose to interpret Article 231A as Germany taking full blame for World War I. It was a German ploy for sympathy, a war guilt lie. Pay attention to History.net again. Quote, Article 231, when correctly read in conjunction with Article 232, immediately following it, actually limits Germany's responsibility for the war by requiring Germany to pay only for civilian damages caused by its invasion and occupation of Belgium and northern France. And, as noted, even that was further limited to what the Allies calculated Germany could pay. End quote. The real failure of the treaty. It's been over 100 years since World War I started and ended. I think that should give most of us by now a clear view without having to be dissuaded by bias. Take the war reparations of the 132 billion gold marks, or equivalent today of 269 billion US dollars, the amount originally agreed upon. That's the only number given when trying to find the actual monetary value. Germany only made one payment in regard to the Treaty of Versailles on June 28, 1919. And before 1955, that money was borrowed. Germany wasn't paying back anything, so you had a few groups try and help out. The Dawes Plan in 1924 did nothing but lower Germany's debt amount. The Young Plan in 1929 did nothing but lower Germany's debt amount. Finally, the London Debt Agreement of 1933, where Germany's repayment number was halved, stipulated that repayment of the remaining debt was linked to Germany's economic growth and exports. The debt service export revenue ratio could not exceed 3%. Furthermore, the original agreed upon amount accepted by Germany wasn't even close to the original number, and even that number took Germany 92 years to pay off. All the bitching, moaning, and whining about how stiff and damaging reparations were for Germany and how it fucked them over was again another lie. I continue to harp on this as you need to know how Hitler used this document, the Treaty of Versailles, was the calling card and the perfect opportunity for himself and the Nazis to come to power for all the wrong reasons. In the treaty, Germany lost some territory and all of its colonies. Yeah, punishment my ass. The colonies weren't needed, and fortunately for Germany, it was fewer mouths to feed. And fortunately for everyone else, it allowed fewer Nazi assholes that we'd have to deal with in World War II. Regarding this part of the treaty, I'd say it was a win-win. There are a lot of mistakes in drafting the Treaty of Versailles. I'm not sure the authors of it ever thought that it would never be enforced, although allowing Germany to voluntarily comply is like allowing a drug offender to opt out of a urine test. There's no doubt that they all patted one another on the back and toasted with vintage cognac on the completion of this treaty. But if they had added Cuba as a signee to this treaty, Germany would have faced more enforcement. I think if the first few words of the treaty started, Dear Abby, it would have garnered more military enforcement. We've been told by thousands upon thousands of different sources how crushing, demoralizing, and unfair the Treaty of Versailles sanctions were. It will set Germany back 100 years, unquote, people said. It took Germany 92 years to pay back a fraction of what they had agreed to pay, but reviewing all the articles, I think this may be the only thing, albeit that they agreed to. The rise of Hitler and the Nazis, blame the Treaty of Versailles. The rise of hyperinflation and the collapse of German economy, blame the Treaty of Versailles. All these restitutions on the military that were never adhered to, blame the Treaty of Versailles. It was all bullshit. The treaty didn't hinder one person for any reason from the day it was signed to today. The citizens of the Weimar Republic of Germany, through Hitler and the Nazis, were not hindered by the Treaty of Versailles and actually benefited from it economically and militarily. Furthermore, and the only reason I give a shit about this treaty is that it led to the world-class propagandist lies which catapulted and gave a platform to the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party. The Treaty of Versailles didn't cause or lead to anything. The lies about it did. The only ones who gave a shit, as they were the only ones affected by it, were the New York bankers in France. The justifications of death, torture, destruction, etc. are really what came out of it. And Germans bought it hook, line, and sinker. Germany started World War I, and 40 million casualties later, their quote punishment was to sign an unenforceable treaty after getting their asses kicked. And of course, the Germans didn't have to adhere to it. Then the German citizens listened to and elected a sociopath who told them how bad this unenforceable treaty was. Shockingly, he got elected and started a war that had around 70 million deaths, while systematically murdering 6 million Jews that only made up 0.0075% of the German population at the time. Germans were also killed while perpetrating the largest looting of Europe since, well, no one. And you add in the total devastation of property and all the other theft, my gosh, what a fucking mess. The world's largest Ponzi scheme was committed by the Nazis in a 12-year run, aided by a treaty that had no bearing. You can't make this stuff up. What does it say about those Aryan, white supremacist racist people? Is naive and ignorant part of the Aryan DNA? What could be so lacking in someone's life that they would gravitate to and endorse an ideology that is all a lie and could easily do their own research to find it out for themselves? Everything Hitler said he was going to do didn't happen. The premise of everything he promised never panned out. And now, as we quote, check the box score on his career, he turned out to be nothing but a psychotic, narcissistic, sociopathic liar. He ended exactly as he started, except he avoided a tremendous amount of death and theft in between. Even if you could overlook all his personality traits, he's just a murderer with an immense ego, a liar that fooled millions upon millions, but a liar nonetheless. Thank you.